to 91 FM. BBC Radio 2.
Hello again, Janice Long here, and this is Liverpool, the new wave on BBC Radio 2. Last week we hung out in Eric's, the punk and new wave club, which started the city's post-Beatles musical scene. And this week we're checking out 3 seminal bands who emerged in its wake. Echo and the Bunnymen, Wah and Wah the Rest, and the Teardrop Explodes, and the trio of unique and extrovert characters behind them. Ian McCulloch, Pete Wylie and Julian Cope, the Crucial 3. So here it is, 3 would-be superstars, McCulloch, Wylie and Cope. They form a band and they call it the Crucial 3. And with a name like that, they obviously thought they were going places. A couple of other blokes emerged at the beginning, but they were swiftly given the big elbow. So the 3 egos, all very much a part of the Eric scene. Mac, the cool, doors listening dude. His schoolmate Wylie, with a heart and mouth as big as Liverpool. And Cope, the oh-so-exuberant trainee teacher out-of-towner who was searching for more than dishing out homework and detention. In fact, it was Julian who kept banging into Wylie at a Clash gig, and before Wylie punched his lights out, suggested, hey, let's not fight, let's form a band. And so it was, the Crucial 3. Pete Wylie remembers the band's early rock and roll days.
When we formed the Crucial 3, there was another guy who was going to be in it. There was me, there was McCulloch from the Bunnymen, there was Julian from Teardrop, there was my mate Spenner, who was the drummer, and there was another guy called Colin, the postman, because he was a postman and his name was Colin, so that was kind of convenient. And Julian sacked him before we'd even started rehearsing, and he in a ruthless kind of way. And I remembered that that was kind of a hurtful thing to him, because we all had great ambitions, and Colin knew that we would all do something good. But Julian was quite ruthless, and he was obviously very aware of his situation in it.
Pete Wylie and Ian McCulloch had been inflicted on each other since school days, so it was kind of inevitable that they'd form a band together one day. But how did the geeky guy from Tamworth fit in? Over to Ian McCulloch.
Pete Wylie, I think he'd convened a meeting in Probe Records, which is where we hung out, and this Wazzick turns up in a boiler suit, sprayed on the back is this, he'd even made a stencil so he could spray it proper, saying, I am the product of urban sprawl. And this fella's from Tamworth, you know what I'm saying? He's carrying a bass guitar in this weird teak kind of thing that used to be able to get tellies in. And I'm thinking, you are joking, aren't you? This fella is Bradley Walsh with a touch of, you know that fella who used to go, chase me? He looked like him as well, and a hell of a lot of Leif Garrett. And he had his kecks, this boiler suit, tucked into some weird Biggles boots, you know. But as he's designated me as the singer, I'm thinking, what have I let myself in for? Just because I know Pete Wylie.
So picture the scene, Cope in a boiler suit, toilet seat toting Wylie, and Mac either in his dad's two-tone brown Mac or his ma's tan leather coat, and of course Spenner, the Pete Best of the Crucial 3 on knitting needles. Yep, looking good. But were there any tunes?
If it wouldn't hurt me brothers, Julian and Mac, I could do you a 4-song session of Crucial 3 songs. It only rehearsed a few times, but it did exist, and we had 3 songs, one called the Salamine Shuffle, and Mac wrote these lyrics. It said, when I have hives, I use calamine. When I want to dance, I do the Salamine Shuffle. And it was like a Dawsey, terrible Dawsey rip-off. We had the song called I'm Bloody Sure You're on Dope, which is what Mac said his mum shouted to him, because Mac lived this real nocturnal life. He'd call for him at 4 in the afternoon, and he wouldn't come down and meet you. For a couple of hours, he'd stay in his bedroom. So we had this song, and the lyrics were, I'm bloody sure you're on dope, I'm bloody sure you're on dope, all I know is I can't cope. Have you been out sniffing glue? Have you been out sniffing glue? Just wait till I get hold of you. And it was fantastic, like a Velvet Underground kind of song, because your influence was very clear then.
Well, despite sitting rooms for rehearsals, courtesy of Mac and Wylie's mums, an abundance of knitting needles, and Mac's obvious, overwhelming enthusiasm and support for the project, after just 2 months and no gigs, the Crucial Three split up. Wylie and Cope joined up with the ever-flamboyant Pete Burns, later of Dead or Alive, to form the Mystery Girls, a band which performed one sensational gig at Eric's in '77, where incidentally Pete Burns sang with a blanket over his head. And then, in true Pete Wylie style, they split up.
Out in the lemon-flavoured rain, she peels an orange on the Hunt's Cross train. They're playing radios and garage songs. She plays Vivaldi all night long. She's my love-flavoured, melting blue delicious.
Paul Simpson was another of the in-crowd at Eric's. Paul, a gifted musician and a real style merchant who became a founder member of the Teardrop Explodes, had just parted company with a band calling themselves Industrial Domestic, which also featured Will Sargent. More of him to come. Paul and Julian Cope both hated fake punk groups, and this allegiance led to the formation of A Shallow Madness, another band featuring the elusive vocal talents of Mr. McCulloch. Paul remembers the beginnings.
Shallow Madness, it didn't last too long, mainly because of Ian McCulloch. He was this reluctant singer, but he just never sang. We'd have rehearsals every week, which was a big deal in those days. It'd be 2 buses carrying a keyboard on the bus, and we used to rehearse in this flat on Belmont Road, belonging to someone called Smelly Ellie. And every week we'd be waiting for Ian to open his mouth. Oh, suddenly, these songs are crap. You'd just never get him to sing, So we didn't know he had this great voice,
It was rubbish. It was like so horrible. And this is 1977 or something, and the punk's still kind of going, And these are doing these Allman Brothers things with someone out of Kraftwerk on keyboards. It was unbelievably crap, so I tried not to be there, and then I got hoofed out the band as if I hadn't already hoofed myself out. And that was it. And then I met Will, and the rest is the future.
Seven seas, swimming them so well. Glad to see my face among them, kissing the tortoise shell.
It was late '78 when Ian McCulloch met up with guitarist Will Sargent. They were introduced to a drum machine called Echo and recorded some demos. The world of Eric's was now their oyster. Mac remembers their first ever gig.
Yeah, it was in Eric's, I think it was November the 12th or something. Les turns up with this 3-string bass that he'd only met this cat once. And he had one of them check shirts that you get off the catalogue with the button-down collars on the Arnold Palmer, kind of. He used to scissor cut holes in, instead of being a true punk and wearing the holes in himself. We played in front of about 50 people. Most of them were Pete Wylie. And we only had one song, which was 3 minutes long and became about 25 that night because I was really digging it on stage. And I thought, I've got star quality, you better make the most of it.
If I said
4 months after their debut gig, Echo and the Bunnymen released their first single on Bill Drummond's local Zoo record label. Yes, he of Big in Japan fame, who went on to do KLF stuff, hang out with Tammy Wynette, burn money and write books. Bill Drummond managed both the Bunnymen and the Teardrops. Pictures on My Wall was the first Echo and the Bunnymen release. The word was out, more and more people were picking up on the band, and Corova Records from London started sniffing around. Out went Echo, oh, if she could talk. In came Pete de Freitas, and Rescue, the Bunnymen's second single, got played more than once on Radio 1. It was the beginning of a new decade, and for the Bunnymen, a chance to taste success outside the city.
won't you come on down to my, won't you come on down to my rescue?
Their first album, Crocodiles, came out in the summer of 80 and made it to number 17. And they looked so good. They wore long coats, Mac's spiky hair was aped by Mac clones. The Back of Love made it into the top 40. And by 81, the press were oh so interested. Heaven Up Here, the Bunnymen's second album, made the top 10. And America, Japan and Europe were chomping at the bit. Porcupine followed, the band's third and biggest album. And then for me, still one of the best albums of all time, Ocean Rain. There was Mac's memorable performance on Top of the Pops when he took off his shirt, and Crystal Day with hundreds and hundreds of Bunnymen fans converging in Liverpool for a day out, culminating in a gig at St George's Hall. The Bunnymen appeared to be taking on the world, but by 1988 it was all over. The band had fallen to a common fate. Mac had decided to go it alone. He and Will stopped talking. But it was a pettiness that soon paled into insignificance when the Bunnymen's drummer, Pete de Freitas, was tragically killed in a motorbike accident on his way up to Liverpool.
Yeah, well, it was after we'd split up. It was a year after I'd kind of split the band, and they'd started again as Gecko and the Bogus Men, something with some Burke kind of on vocals. And, you know, I felt betrayed, all of that kind of. It was my idea to jib the band anyway. But at the time, I just thought, I've done 10 years with these cats, and if I call it a day, you don't carry on with that name, you know. Particularly a name that they all profess to hate. So I was kind of not really speaking to any of them anyway, and then when the news came in, it was like, it brought it home how stupid it's only rock and roll anyway. And the funeral of Pete was just unbelievable. You know, my mum and dad's funeral didn't come close in terms of, because you expect them to die, you know, before you do, and the Pete thing, it was like just waves of emotion, and we were close. All four of us were so close and so different, incompatible in a lot of ways, but when it came to the crunch, a total unit that I think shone far above any other group.
In the years after their split, Echo and the Bunnymen released a couple of albums with a new singer, and Mac crooned and did a couple of his own. Neither incarnations were to repeat the success of the original Bunnymen. Then, in the mid-90s, the boys, Mac and Will, got it together again with Electrofiction. And if you missed them, a blistering band, an astounding first gig at the Little Lomax in Liverpool. But it was not the return of the Bunnymen.
When we were doing Electrofiction, there were all these people turning up saying, you know, you're going to reform the Bunnymen and all of this. And now we do gigs and it's like, will you play some Electrofiction songs? That album's fantastic. It's one of my top 3. And it's like, where the bloody hell were you when we put it out, you know? And I knew there was something wrong when a taxi driver, I was going into town from our house, and he says, aren't you that fella from Echo and the Bunnymen? And I went, yeah, you've got it. And he said, what are you up to now, lad? I said, we formed a new band, me and the old guitarist, called Electrofiction. And he goes, that name is crap. And he pointed at every shop name on the way from Eggy Road, even Huddleston's Fishmongers. He said, that's a better name than Electrification or whatever. He said, you're going nowhere with that name, pal.
It's the twists and turns of the cigarette burns, the holes in the mind of the nebulous mass. You get no returns if you don't learn the dip between man and the hole in your past. Unders to someone's ass, see you in hell with
The demise of Electrofiction meant the return of Mac to Echo and the Bunnymen. Yes, Mac and Will regrouped with Les Pattinson. Now, he's gone again, but the band continues. In fact, Mac and co are currently in the middle of a UK tour. So, whilst Mr McCulloch was doing very well for himself, the other three Shallow Madness members, Cope, Simpson and Finkler, decided to stay together and form another legendary combo, the Teardrop Explodes.
I've been thinking about you, I hope that you've been thinking about me. I've been talking about you, I've been talking about you in my sleep. And when I dream about you. And when I scream about you. I go up, 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 up,
So it's 1978. High unemployment meant the days of signing on, getting a band together and hanging around people's flats. The Teardrop Explodes were doing all of that, and the name came courtesy of a caption in the Marvel comic, which was being read by Paul Simpson, who was signing on, getting a band together and hanging around at someone's flat. They were all suffering for their art, even trainee teacher Julian Cope.
Despite everybody being on the dole and everything, everybody was also into being on the dole. They were into the idea that they had to do it that way. You know, it wasn't a cool thing to do to form a group and have a job going while you formed your group. The idea was that you were on the dole and you had to get a group going. It made everybody feel so much more fervent about things. It's like a hope that people have, and people have a good time because of it. That's why everybody went out and started looking extreme, I suppose, because it gave them some kind of hope. At least it was like physically people would notice them.
Now, whilst Mac remembers Cope as being more of a cross between Leif Garrett and Bradley Walsh, there were many who found out-of-towner Julian's uncoolness part of his appeal. Paul Simpson.
One of the things that attracted me about Julian was his enthusiasm, because it wasn't a Liverpool thing. It wasn't cool, you see, to be exuberant. And Julian used to run up and give you a big hug when he saw you. We were mortified. We'd be like, oh God, we should stop doing this. It was just very different from... He didn't have that Liverpool kind of funny negativity thing. He just didn't even know about it.
Sometimes I wonder if you're really living. Oh, what is this feeling you think that you're giving? But you can sit down, erect and dismayed, wondering what are all the plans that you laid. But you can...
Julian was obsessed with 60s kind of West Coast bands and stuff, and he liked a tune, and he'd started all that bop, 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 bop and all that stuff, and I just didn't like it. I was into The Fall and Perubo and more experimental music, and we'd done Sleeping Gas, which I didn't actually like, and it was getting single of the week everywhere and people raved about it. I was like, this isn't actually very good, this isn't what I want to do. So on the eve of recording Bouncing Babies, the second Teardrop Explodes single, I just thought, I don't want to do this. I don't really want my name on another embarrassing record, which is, I mean, now I like those things, but at the time I thought it was pretty grim. So I left to do my own thing.
And off he went, doing his own thing, including the Wild Swans, Care with the Lightning Seeds Ian Brodie, and his instrumental project Skyray. Paul was replaced by Dave Balfe. Finkler on guitar was eventually replaced by Alan Gill, and there was Gary Dwyer on drums with Copey on bass and singing. Former Deaf School member and Madness producer Clive Langer started working with the Teardrop Explodes in 1979.
Some songs occasionally I thought were a bit wimpy and a bit like not my kind of thing exactly, but I really liked them. I mean, I used to argue with Balfe a bit, you know, because he was a bit, had his own opinions. But no, I really liked Teardrops, especially, you know, we did the first recording, which was not Reward, Treason. And then Reward was a hit, then they re-released Treason, but I loved Treason when we did it.
I've been living through changes and I could swing for you. I can see the veins in my hands are showing through.
And was Mr. Julian on another planet, baby?
We did come across his drug habits at that time, and they vaguely interfered with the record making. We actually made records very quickly with them until sort of acid kicked in, and then we discussed the last chord of Reward for about 3 hours, you know. So that slowed down the recording process, but that was only a one-off situation.
Friend I have is a passionate friend, but I can't see buying love. I dream of a love affair that's over past and crying. So
The Teardrop Explodes officially split up on November the 15th, 1982. That's exactly 4 years after the first gig in Eric's with Echo and the Bunnymen. Julian Cope returned to his native Tamworth and began a solo career, leading to several albums, including hit singles Well Shut Your Mouth and Trampoline. And after writing his autobiographies, Head On and Repossessed, he turned his pen to higher things and in 1998 published an 8-year study on the megalithic sites of ancient Britain. Stone circles to you and me. And what of the final part of the unholy trinity? What had happened to Pete Wylie since his Crucial 3 and Mystery Girl days?
You better run, 'cause this is the day someone remembers what you said, so you better pray.
I'd formed a band, about 500 bands actually, and eventually Pete Fulwell, who ran Eric's, said, I saw you play with the Mystery Girls and I've never seen such a powerful performance from 3 characters. Pete Fulwell always says that when me, Julian Cope and Pete Burns went on stage, instead of the audience moving forward as was traditional, they all stepped back. Such was the force of ego on stage. And he was always saying, what you doing? I said, I'm forming the best band in the world. And eventually he got kind of annoyed with me. He said, there's good news and there's bad news. If you record some demos next week, I'll pay for them. If you don't record some demos next week, you can never come to Eric's again. And that was my life. That was the hub of my life, you know. So I kind of started doing these demos. I didn't have a name for the band. I was working in Eric's during the day as well, cleaning and working on the bar and stuff. And I cycled into town on a boiling hot day in me leather jeans, me leather biker jacket and me boots. And I was just boiling. And as we got to we started using that word wah from reggae records, from Prince Farai records. He'd introduce toasts by saying, say wah, you know, the Prince of Darkness, blah, blah, blah. So we all used to go, say wah, and it just became wah, and it just replaced wow. And instead of having to say a sentence, if you saw a girl who was attractive, you go, wah, girl. And I got to the doorway of Eric's, and Roger Eagle opened the door. I just said to him, wah, heat. And he went, well, that's the name for your band. So we started as Wah Heat, it's this very intense 3, maybe 4-piece. The very first gig we did at the Everyman in Liverpool, Julian played keyboards because our keyboard player had gone to Oxford, the university, not to rob cars. And then we started calling ourselves Wah because that's what we did for short, and we made that the name of the band. Plus it meant we could get really massive posters with just W-A-H, exclamation mark, and exclamation mark has always got to be in the name. And we started just building things from there, you know, and that was really exciting time.
So there was Pete. Everyone felt he was going to be a star. However, not everyone was sure about his dress sense.
And I remember walking down the street and I had a big badge which had made myself, which as a tribute to the Clash, which said Sod the Jubilee in cut-out newspaper letters. And I was walking down the street with this suit, safety pins, and a big badge on. And this woman who I used to deliver papers to had said, oh, Pete, what are you dressed like that for? Are you working on the buses? And I thought I was absolutely destroying the government, whereas she just saw me as a mad lad in a suit and a big badge, you know. You came back to Liverpool after doing Top of the Pops and Story of the Blues. Instead of you just being seen as a bit of a wacky kid when I go up to see me mum, I'm suddenly a pop star, you know. And we watched Top of the Pops in my mum's house, and then me and Josie, who I was going out with at the time, we walked up from my mum's to the bus. So I'm on Top of the Pops, but I still go for the bus. And as we walked down the street, we saw these schoolgirls across the road, and they were doing that, nudging each other and going, it's him, it's him. And I looked over and I went, did you see us on Top of the Pops? And they went, yeah, you were crap.
Wah Heat, Shambiko say Wah, the mighty Wah, Wah whoever, exclamation mark. Wylie is the man who was given a guitar by the Clash's Mick Jones and was told that he could pay him back when he was famous. The man who is legendary for having a Pete Wylie +1 on every guest list in town, and he wants it on his tombstone. The man who broke his back and survived and lived through every kind of record company deal imaginable. He too is still writing good stuff and playing some of his best gigs ever. So, Wylie, Mac and Cope, three of the biggest egos and three of the biggest rivals. Or is that just music biz codswallop?
There was a great rivalry between the Teardrops and the Bunnymen, but that was after I had left. Even though I'd left, I was still great friends with the Teardrops. I'd be going on tour with them, but I'd also be going on tour with the Bunnymen, hearing all the bitching between them all, you know.
But the rivalry thing between me, Mac and Julian was exciting, you know, and I think that's the thing that made Liverpool special, with the rivalries. We were so close-knit.
I really liked You Better Scream and 7 Minutes to Midnight, so instantly, the first chance I had, I slagged him off because I thought he was competition, and we fell out. It was obviously because I thought he was handy, you know.
The rivalry extended to Pete Burns, to Holly, to Bill Drummond, to Paul, everyone. We were all best mates and rivals at the same time, you know. The fact that the three of us had something to compete with. So if Mac did a gig at Eric's, I wanted to do a gig at Eric's better than him and get more people in. You know, if Julian was playing out of Liverpool, I wanted to do a tour, you know, and that competitive, healthy thing. People don't really remember it this way. We did help each other. Like Mac sometimes will admit that I helped him out and taught him guitar and encouraged him. When Teardrop played the Band on the Wall in Manchester, I went over with them. Gary, the drummer's kit was coming off stage, Gary Dwyer. And when it was coming off stage, I held it on and I sat in front of a bass drum for the whole gig to help him out, you know. And so we weren't all just kind of cutting at each other's throats. We were kind of mates, you know.
Mighty Wah with Heart as Big as Liverpool. Now next week I'll be chucking out those pointy boots and getting into my Frankie Says Relax t-shirt as I check out the visual splendour of Pete Burns, the corduroy slickness of OMD and the pure outrageousness of Frankie Goes to Hollywood. Into the Pleasure Dome, electro-pop and the 80s next week.
Liverpool.
Thank you, Janice. Do you reckon she'll make it back to Birmingham in time? I hope so.
BBC Radio.